Welcome back to the channel. Now, I like to react to the comments because that, gives me a good guide as to what people want to see. And one thing that has kept coming up is flipping bangers. So I thought let's have a look, see what we can find out. For those of you not aware, Flipping Bangers was presented by Gregory and Trickett, who had allegedly ditched their day jobs to start a little business between themselves of picking up and restoring unloved classics and then selling them on for a profit. Does that sound a familiar format? It's slightly different to Wheeler Dealers, that both of these guys were working on the car. It wasn't one mechanic and one sort of car dealer setup, but there was a bit of a continuation element that a chap called Paul Brackley, who you may remember from the early series of Wheeler Dealers, was the quiet one that was always helping out Ed. He was actually technical support for this program, so there was a bit of overlap. Budget wise, this very much was at the bottom end, £500,000 purchase budget at the front end to try and sort of make it more accessible, I think, to people. It ran for 3 series and it started in 2018, and the last episode first aired in January 2022. And in this video, we are going to see if we can find out what happened to the first 3 cars, and they are a Triumph Spitfire, a Volkswagen Golf and a Toyota MR2. Before I go any further, a quick point of clarification. Wherever you look, there seems to be a different sequence for the episodes of, nearly said Wheeler Dealers, of Flipping Bangers. Got there in the end. So what I've done, I'm using the IMDb, which is the International Movie Database, as the baseline for the sequence of episodes for this program. So I'm going to do them in that order. Now, first off, we have a 1973 Triumph Spitfire, and this program first aired on the 6th of April 2018. This was purchased as a fairly tatty old Triumph Spitfire, which over the 5 days that the guys set themselves, they gave a quick tidy up, bit of servicing and so on. More of a sort of rattle can resto, you could almost call it, and sold it on allegedly at the end of the week. So to find out what's happened to this car post-show, first stop I went for was the MOT site. But of course, the problem with this is 2018, this car became MOT exempt, so it was optional to put the car in for MOT. So beyond the September 2017 MOT, which I think is the one that the lads would have put the car through, because that would sequence with the program being launched the following spring, I've got nothing to work on. So as an option, I've gone across to our partner My Car Check to see what that can tell us. Well, one interesting thing it told me that I wasn't aware, that this car was originally brown and had been resprayed white, but this happened back in 1985. And come to think of it, you don't really see many white Triumph Spitfires, do you? On the ownership side, My Car Check tells us that the most recent change was January 22, and the previous change of ownership was November 2017. So my guess would be that November 2017 was when the car was sold post-program, and then obviously changed the hands again just over a couple of years ago. So a bit more Googling, and I found it. It is now owned by somebody who works for a company that most of us in the classic cars could relate to, Haynes. And it is owned by a guy called Nigel Donnelly, and I'll get his title right, he's a digital product manager. And it was the one that acquired it in January 22. And if you go onto the Haynes website, there's an area called Haynes World, and he's put 3 articles on there, and basically he explains that when he first acquired the car, it had a replacement bonnet, because the one when they sold it in the show, you could quite clearly see the rust holes, and also that the carburetors have been given an overhaul. Since then, he's done a couple of other articles on it, mainly wiring woes and the ignition woes he's having under the bonnet. But apart from that, he seems to be enjoying it. So that one is definitely live and well and still being enjoyed. So next up, we've got a VW Golf GTI, and that was registration number J704EWP. And this program first went out on the 13th of April 2018. Now the lads brought this very much as a project. It was full of spares, engines, body panels and so on. And over the usual week that they set themselves to restore these cars, they did the various work on it, got it up and running and sold it on. Now if we look back at the MOT history as a start point to see what's been happening with this car, prior to it turning up with the program, the last MOT was 2008, and that sort of makes sense with the state the car was in. The next MOT is September 17, and I think this is becoming clear this was the period that the lads were working on the car and getting MOTs on them. So I think very much that was a Flipping Bangers one. And then if we look at my car check, that tells us that car then changed hands in December 17. So I imagine that was when it was sold after the program. Goes a bit quiet on it then. It reappears at an MOT station in February 19, so 18 months after the Flipping Bangers MOT, and it went from a fail to a pass, and it done just over 131,000 miles at that point. We then go quiet again until November 21, when on the 9th there is a change of ownership. And the interesting thing is that's when the tax on the car ends, and it wasn't renewed, so it hasn't been taxed for road use since that point. Now a couple of weeks after that change of ownership, it pops to an MOT station, initially fails but passes the following day. And interestingly, since that February 19 MOT, it had only done about 1,300 miles, so it really hasn't done a lot. And then the final appearance I've got for that one is December 22, where it goes straight through on a pass at an MOT, but it's only done 19 miles since the previous year's MOT. And well, it sort of makes sense, as it's not been taxed, it shouldn't be being used on the road anyway. Of course, it could be used as a track car or so on, but that one seems to have gone extremely quiet. And of course now that final MOT has also expired, so that one's gone for a little bit of a sleep. So our last car for this first video is from episode 3, which was the Toyota MR2, registration number H275XGX. And this episode first aired on the 20th of April 2018. Now the story behind this car was it was being sold by the father of the owner because the son had issues with speed cameras and decided to go back to a Fiat Panda. The lads did their normal thing over the week, gave it a bit of a refurb, sort of servicing, and ended up wrapping it in a paler blue vinyl because the bodywork was quite faded in places. And at the end of it, actually sold it back to the chap that owned it. Obviously he decided he wasn't having problems with speed cameras anymore, and it went off happily with the car. Now if we start off with the MOT history on this car to give us a feel of what's going on. It had a pass in November 17, so I imagine that is when the lads from Flipping Bangers had it. And it noted on there that the seals had some corrosion and the rear tyres were getting low. But otherwise it seemed to have a reasonably clear bill of health, considering it was approaching 200,000 miles. And then that MOT expired in November 18 and it didn't get represented anywhere. So that's not a good start. And even worse, when we do a general vehicle check on DVLA, this vehicle's not listed at all. So that's not a good sign. Could have gone on a private plate, probably unlikely. And then when we go over to my car check, that gives us the final vote on this one. Excuse me, back on the 2nd of August 2018, that MR2 had a certificate of destruction issued. So that one, I'm afraid, has been scrapped. I hope you really enjoyed it. It's a little bit of a diversion for us, and I thought you might be interested in what happened to some of those cars. And I need to hear from you if you've really enjoyed this one, as to whether it's worth us making the effort to do any more. So hit the like button and drop something in the comments. And you might even enjoy this other video, which we think is going to be right up your street.